الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا دائما أبدا نحمده على آلائه كما نحمده على بلائه ونستغفره مما أحاط به علمه ثم الصلاة والسلام على الذي بعثه رحمة للعالمين خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين اللهم صل على محمد عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصاب أبي عبد الله الحسين عليه الصلاة والسلام. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Sisters and brothers, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يقول الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة ويطيعون الله ورسوله أولئك سيرحمهم الله إن الله عزيز حكيم. Surah Tawbah, verse 71. The male and female of the believers support each other in encouraging good and discouraging evil. They establish prayer and pay their social dues while submitting to the command of Allah and His Messenger. Those are the ones whom Allah will bless with His mercy. One of the verses in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala divides the community based on faith, what we call technically group identity these days. In the same manner that believers, male and female, are put together or classified together as a group, those who disbelieve in the Holy Quran also have been put together. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. So there is a collective identity for the believers, and at the same time opposing, there is a collective identity for the disbelievers. Our responsibility would be how to transition, be watchful. And it's strange that Surah Anfal 73 that talks about disbelievers, Allah commands the believers to be watchful of the negative consequence of the disbelievers within their own community. This is a theme that we can inshallah develop in the future. But going back to last night, the central theme of my talk was the accusation that was labeled against Islam being a patriarchal faith, privileging male against female. This now dominates the academic discourse in social sciences, anthropology, etc., or even Orientalism, the Western attack against Islam. Now, it created a discord within the Muslim community, within the academics of Muslim community, and divided them into two groups. There are some who say, yes, there is such a thing, and others that reject it. But those who advance such an accusation against Islam, they list a number of critique, a number of questions, or give example of cases. Number one, repeatedly, book after book after book, article after article, seminars after seminars on Surah An-Nisa, the concept of darb and domestic violence. The second one, the differences that exist as far as inheritance between male and female. The third and concept of hudud and diyat. If a man kills a woman, what would be the punishment? And what will happen if a woman kills a man? According to at least the literal interpretation of some of the verses, they are not the same. Relationship in marriage and concept of isma and nushuz within the relationship. There's a tendency these days that male claim to be the isma in their hand, and they leave the wives in limbo. I have cases that they come to me after being left in limbo. The man has left, already got married somewhere else, has children, is not prepared to release the woman from the religious obligation by granting her religious divorce. 7 years, 4 years, 3 years, more or less. There are sisters that come, and their cases are being catalogued. It's not something. When we talk to the judges in Denver, and in Dearborn and other places, immediately they remind us that you ulama, scholars fail to deliver justice to the families. They have to come to the court to seek justice. Political and judiciary position. Are we allowing women to become president or become judges within our own judiciary courts? It's problematic. Not every country is providing it. Some countries, they do not allow. Their roles in history, in reading history, and how much we cover about them in history. From my point of view, I think one has to make a distinction that these criticisms are against interpretation, not against the original law that is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Islam. And last night I tried to find out and said that if we consider the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be impartial to all these material distinctions, then one has to be mindful of how we're going to interpret. And if we were to search for the root of this patriarchal interpretation, whether it's in tafsir, whether in reading history, whether in hadith, even you go to Nahj al-Balagha, there are reported things about Amir al-Mu'mineen regarding what we call misogynistic interpretation of relationship between men and women. These are weak ahadith that somehow managed to get into the book. So if we were to search for the root of these, I tend to go back to the early history, Jahiliyyah time, and see how after this concept of Saqifa, these mindsets were brought back into the society by individuals that the Jahiliyyah mindset was still steeped into their life. The 10, 20 years or so of the life of the Holy Prophet was not able to eradicate these kind of things. And I pointed out that during the life of the Holy Prophet, women were allowed to come to the mosque, offer Salat al-Jama'ah with the men, with one protocol to observe that as soon as the Jama'ah finished, either men left first, women second, or women left first and men second. The second Khalif comes to power, absolutely forbidden for men to participate within Salat al-Jama'ah and come to masjid. Why? Because second Khalif was still under the Jahili mindset. That men are superior, women are nothing but mata', that you can buy, purchase, exchange. Isn't it the same person that admitted after Surah Al-Kawthar, Surah Al-Takwir, that says that regarding rejection of parents, that they buried their daughters alive during the Jahiliyyah mindset, he admitted that I buried 4 of my daughters. So this is the root. This is where we have to do. We have to search for one of the examples that we have, and I gave few other examples, issue of Hajar, Ismail, and few others, but one of the examples that we have is Ashura and Karbala. When we write the history and we analyze it, somehow the role of women which is not that much different from the role of men. According to the verse that I recited, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. The responsibility, the obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar is equally commanded to both men and women, the believers. And when we come to Karbala, we see that granted during the early period of from Medina to Karbala, the face that really dominated the whole thing was Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi. But it doesn't mean to the exclusion of anybody else. There were women that played their roles, but they are absent from our reading of history. We discover suddenly Zainab salamullah alayha on the day of Ashura. Why not? About 55, 56 years of a constant struggle. For our masa'ib, we call her Masa'ib. When it comes to musibah, we call Zainab Masa'ib. The person, the female within the Ahlul Bayt that suffered from early age until Ashura. But she never stopped the jihad and the struggling. At the age of 5 or 6, she lost her grandfather. 3 months later or 2 months later, lost her mother. She was the one who witnessed her mother behind the door, squeezed by and kicked by the second Khalif and his cronies. Then saw how the new administration structured its political establishment, where Ali, the central figure of Islam, was pushed aside. And then the whole process until Ali came to power, so how they orchestrated one war after the other to undermine his authority. Then comes Imam Hassan and sees what happened to Imam Hassan during Kufa and a marginalization of Imam Hassan and martyrdom of Imam Hassan. Then comes Imam Hussein. Now, suddenly on the day of Ashura, we remember that there was another daughter for Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi that called Zainab, that played a major role. And this is the role that we designate to her. And even then, the role of other women that last night I pointed to at least. The Mariya bint Munqidh al-Basriya, we don't have much information about this important woman. Beyond some anecdotal reports. Who was she? Yes, she had a husband and few children that participated in the Battle of Jamal, supporting Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi, and they all were martyred. She opened her house to make it a center for education, educating the Shia community. Some of the men that participated in the Battle of Karbala were the student of that house. Isn't that a role model? Shouldn't she be part of the legend? We don't talk about it. I mentioned Dalham, Taw'am, and even Salama at the time when the Holy Imam wants to leave Medina, Salama comes. All of these women participated in the early age. During Ashura, certainly there were a number of women that inshallah another time we can discuss, but their role became subsidiary to the role of Zainab, because now Al-Aqila Zainab dominates the women's world, and they worked with her in organizing and managing the whole affair of Ashura. They worked as what we call nursing responsibility. They worked as supporting and comforting and helping responsibilities. I don't think any of us, unless you have been to a battle and you have your children been killed in front of your eyes, you understand the pain of a father or a mother that has to stand on the side and watch the sons and being killed and slaughtered. They need comfort. the role of women came in as a comforting, as supportive, so that even some of these women, when their children were killed, their sons were killed during the battle, they closed their lips. They wouldn't even shed tears so that Ahlul Bayt will not be further distressed. They are a symbol of legend. It's the symbol of patient, legendary patient. That they don't say anything, thinking about Ahlul Bayt. Some women, they only had one child, one son. They come forward and encourage that son to go and defend the Imam. Very rarely we see such sacrifice in human history. They become the symbol of patience. In the battle of the Iraq-Iran war, we saw few of these examples that send all their children forward. And then they met with the Imam as a group. One old lady, I remember the picture many years ago, stood up in front of the Imam. And similar thing happened in Lebanon as well. She apologized to Imam for not having an extra son to provide support in the battle of and supporting the Imam. The mother of Ahmad Mughniya, Martha Ahmad Mughniya, may Allah bless his soul, gave 3 of her children and 1 grandchild. Then went to Samahat Sayyid Sid Hassan Nasrallah and apologized. Sayyidina, I don't have anything else to give. I ask for forgiveness. These are examples. These are the role models for our community, for our women and for our men. Women who, even in the camp of Bani Umayyah, there were women, what we call receptive mind and followers of Ahlul Bayt. They had this dignity and karama that once they found out that their husbands have participated in this heinous act against Ahlul Bayt, they divorced their husband and walked away. That we cannot stay in a house with somebody that has committed this heinous act. So there are a number of examples that we can talk about. But primarily during this period, and to a degree after, the role of Zainab Salaamullah alayha shines, naturally. As a matter of fact, one of the intriguing questions that everybody asked when Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi was leaving Medina, why was it that the Imam is bringing women with him or taking women with him? Imam would respond, Sha'Allah an yarahunna sabaya. He wouldn't go in depth analyzing that there is a reason, there is a rationale. Sha'Allah an yarahunna sabaya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided that they have to be prisoners. So why? I mean, in the Jahiliyyah mindset, even Ibn Abbas asks, Muhammad ibn Hanafiya asks, Abdullah ibn Ja'far, the husband of Zainab Salaamullah alayha, asked the same thing. Ya ibn Rasulullah, you want to go and fight. You have decided to take armed struggle against Yazid. Why are you taking all these wives and the female and the women with you? Because from the Jahili mindset, there were only 2 occasions that the Jahili men would bring their wives with them. Once happened in Uhud, but the mindset, when you are assured of victory in a battle, you bring your wife to become the cheerleaders, to clap. You have won the battle. Number 2, when you are fearful of defeat, you keep your woman behind you to encourage the men not to run away. And none of these 2 cases applied to Imam Hussein. So naturally, for them it was an intriguing act. What they didn't understand, Imam Hussein had a purpose. There was a reason why Imam Hussein wanted to bring these people, women. And that goes to the whole dynamic of Bani Umayyah in establishing the center of power in Sham. Muawiyah was appointed to become the wali or the governor of Sham after his brother Yazid died, and Umar appointed him as the governor of Sham. First Jordan and then Sham. From then onwards, he worked with one goal. نحن شجرة رسول الله. They are the Ahlul Bayt. That's why when we look at the theme and the context of the khutbah and the sermon of Zainab Salamullah alayha in Kufa, and the khutbah and the sermon of Zainab in Sham, mark difference. In Kufa, Zainab Salamullah alayha attacks, a severe attack on the Kufi people, that they had Iman, but they were Jahil. Jahl and Iman combined together. Reminded them of their responsibility about the Imam. Remember what you have done. But in Sham, it is a political kind of a speech, attacking the fundamental central thesis and principle of Bani Umayyah, to be the only Ahlul Bayt. That's why after 40 years of what we call brainwashing, then you have even old Sahabas over time are misled. When they see these people coming in as fugitive and outlaws, they believe it. When the old man stands in the gate of Sham and celebrates, Imam Zain al-Abidin sees him and says, this is the victim of what we call propaganda. He says, Ya Shaykh, have you recited Quran? He says, yes. Strange that these people that Yazid and the central power is defining them as outlaw and bandit is talking about Quran. What do you have to do with Quran? أما قرأت سورة آية التطهير? Yes. We are the one that this verse and passage came for us. The shock of his life. I thought it was Bani Umayyah. So, but there is a concept, what we have in the political philosophy, we call it engineering consensus. So you create an artificial consensus based on propaganda. You constantly bombard the people, Muawiyah, Yazid, Bani Umayyah, these are Ahlul Bayt. And generations grow up being fed with this poison. When Ali was martyred during the month of Ramadan, and the news finally got to Sham that Ali was killed in Mihrab, the first question that came up, we didn't know Ali prayed. That's the success of propaganda. So the goal was, if this bubble that Bani Umayyah has created around themselves has to burst, and the true reality to come out, you need a charismatic figure, equal to, close and equal to Imam Hussein. This is why now these days we have a debate within scholars that Zainab could be al-Ma'suma al-Khamis Ashar, the 15th infallible. Why? Just look at the relationship between Imam Hussein and Zainab Salamullah alayha. Imam al-Asr, Imam Hussein, on the day of Ashura before he goes, Ya Ukhtah, don't forget me in your Salat al-Layl. What does that tell us about Zainab? How much do we know about her character? Women come in, become supporting for Zainab, protecting Zainab. Everywhere she went, these women that we ignore, they become the circle around her to protect her, whether it was in Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad's majlis in Kufa or in Sham. We don't mention anything about them. We don't know who they were. Yes, there were a number of family members within Ahlul Bayt. But the fact that we should give them justice, enough space within our history, etc., is absent. So some criticism is there. In Kufa, when she walks into, during the mall, Souq al-Kufa, she delivers a scathing attack against the people of Kufa. Just think about this point. Marhum Mutari used to say this. He said, if you ever think that people in Kufa that participated against Imam Hussein's and they killed him, they were some group of people that knew nothing about Islam or Ahlul Bayt, you are mistaken. 30,000 gathered together, according to a statistic given by Imam Zain al-Abidin, from our community. Why did suddenly this community turn 180 degrees? When Zainab Salamullah alayha delivers the message, and everybody is surprised. They realized what a mistake. Harakat al-Tawwabin, about a year and a half or 2 years later, is as a consequence of this realization. It was Zainab and other women that once they got to Medina, began to establish a base for an uprising a year later of people of Medina. And the list goes on. So we have to accept that there is a problem in our narratives. We pay attention to all the male. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we should pay attention to these women, and particularly if it wasn't for the role of this woman after, just imagine the scenario. There was no woman in Karbala. Ashura, in a couple of days from now, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, silent. All men have been killed. There is no sign of any souls. Bani Umayyah would have loved this to happen, because then they could have buried the whole thing on the sand of Karbala forever, and you wouldn't have heard much about it, apart from some anecdotal ideas here and there. It was the role of the women to become the messengers for the value of Ahlul Bayt, and we should give them justice. This is one of the consequences of how Kufa became such misguided. Sham had a problem. They never had heard about Ahlul Bayt, and for 30 years, 40 years, they were living in a cocoon, protected from the reality. But what about Kufa? Only a few years before, 10 years before, some of them made bay'ah with Imam Hassan. And a few years before it, they were in the army and the camp of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah salam. So what happened over a 10 years period that such completely changed? When superficial understanding of the faith, shallow understanding of the faith, is combined with ignorance, jahl, this is the consequence. And this is a modality can be repeated again and again and again and again. When jahl and superficial understanding of Islam come together. And we could fall victim to it. Pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from this jahl and ignorance that could devastate our life if we don't pay attention. Also, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to provide us with the guidance that we need, and to be among the true followers of Ahlul Bayt, inshallah. Could I ask everyone to recite 5 times Amman Yujib, because there are a number of people who have asked us to ask everyone. They have sick and ill people within their house. So these nights are critical for asking Allah to grant them speedy recovery, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amman yujibu al-mut المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء من يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. اللهم شافي كل مريض إلهي آمين، وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب الزمان. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.